rather excited to welcome everybody to this episode of the Family Business. This is a gentleman that I've been wanting to talk to for a few years. We go back over 20, and I'm just thrilled to have him on. This is Brett Wall. Brett, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I've been stalking you for a while. It's interesting how these relationships form, and Brett and I have well, his is probably more serious than mine, but a love of wine, and that's kind of where our relationship started 20 years ago. And he's done a bit more with it than I have. I just drink it, but we'll get into that a little later. Brett, if you could give a little context and let everybody know who you are, just take a minute to
Sure.
frame, okay, this is me, this is where I work, this is what I do, and then we'll unpack it because there's a lot there.
Yeah, no problem, Matt. I'd be happy to do that. I work for Medtronic and I run what's called the neuroscience portfolio. And the neuroscience portfolio is about 30% of Medtronic. It's five businesses. These five businesses are our cranial and spinal technologies, our neurovascular, neuromodulation, ENT, pelvic health. These are about $10 billion of revenue, roughly, right around there. And we're a very profitable, good growth, very strong set of businesses overall for Medtronic, and I actually think it's in the greatest space in the world, which is neurotechnology, which is a really exciting, thrilling place to be. We have about 18,000 employees within that particular group between direct and indirect labor. And it's a really, really interesting game-changing group of businesses that make a huge impact on people's lives all over the world. And it's a real privilege to get to do that.
I think the privilege works both ways. I mean, give everybody a bit of context. So how long have you been technically in the same job, Brett?
Well, it's kind of a funny story because in this particular role, I've been there a little over 5 years. But I've been with one version or another of this company for coming on 25. And I started with this as a startup. I'd been in Singapore working for Boston Scientific, and as typically happens with expat assignments, the role I was coming back to wasn't very exciting and just wasn't that interested in it. So I left the company. And Boston was a great company. Don't get me wrong. I still think of them as a wonderful place for me and a great experience that I had. But I wanted to do something different. So I joined this little tiny startup called Microtherapeutics. And it was ultimately part of EV3 because a lot of us that had been at Boston Scientific came together. We had a private equity partner, Warburg Pincus, that funded us. And I always kind of laugh when I talk about it because it was a 10-year run and it was 8 years of existential terror, 1 year of things like really working well, and then we transacted the following year with COVIDian. So that's for all of you listening out there that want to go into that, go do it, and just realize it's going to be an exciting and quite a ride for you. I'd put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, yours has been extraordinary. So let's unpack a bit of this. Your breadth within the neuroscience space is it's multidimensional. How many different aspects of therapy that you all work in? So I know it's hard to get a snapshot of all of neuroscience, but let's break some of that out a bit in your feelings of innovation and technology in specific spaces.
Sure.
And you can pick whichever one of those that you named earlier. But I'm curious where you see the most activity and where you see the most innovation and where you see they need the most help.
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, one of the things that was really interesting for this particular business is the traditional spine business. And if you look at spine, it's been something that has evolved tremendously, and new techniques, technologies over the years have really driven that business a long ways. But it got to the point where there were about 400 competitors in that space. And while there still remains to be innovation in implants, what happened was a lot of companies were just making these implants because it could be done and it was machining and people knew how to do it. And so you had a lot of competitors. And what we looked at were a lot of different things. We started acquiring technology in the space, and we started acquiring that over 20 years ago with the stealth station, navigation. And navigation was something spine surgeons didn't do. So if I look at that, that really changed spine surgery, because now you could have very precise placement and navigation as an aid and an assistant to the surgeon. Well, on top of that, we acquired a robotics platform, Mazor, out of Israel. We acquired that, and now we have this very precise robotic platform that incorporates with our navigation. We acquired breakaway imaging, which is the O-arm, which provides intraoperative imaging, so you can actually confirm that the correction you want to do is actually there. And then we acquired a company out of France that planned these surgeries and created custom implants that were solely for that individual patient. So imagine being able to produce something that's customized for you, but then to do it at scale. And that's what that business was able to do. And then enter Skip Keel into our business 3 years ago. Skip came in and took over the CST business. And Skip actually took all this technology and put it together and actually created a system called ABLE, which is our AI-enabled technology that actually assists in spine to make a major difference in how spine surgery is done. So it's a really fascinating exercise when you bring in great people and people that think differently about things, who can take things that you have and acquire new technology and put it together and package it in a way that actually changes how surgery is done. And the goal here is to do just that, is to make spine surgery more repeatable, more reliable, less revisions, all the things we talk about by using technology to support that. And we were able to use our balance sheet to acquire these technologies, to bring them in and to do that. So that's a very exciting part of that business. We have now probably 16 quarters in a row or so that we've been growing above market.
Wow.
We're taking share in that particular space. It's a major contributor to Medtronic. I mean, that's a $5 billion business on its own. So it's a weather system in Medtronic, and that goes well and helps Medtronic do well. So that's something that's really important. And if I look at the other businesses, areas that I'm excited about that, but other areas that I'm really excited about, I think neuromodulation's an extremely exciting place to be right now. And although the market, probably isn't getting as much credit, for it as it should, there's a real revolution happening there. And we're leading it. And the revolution is around closed loop sensing and being able to not only neurostimulate, but to be able to understand what's happening inside the body, the brain or the spinal cord, and then to be able to change the stimulation real time in response to what the body's actually doing. We just last week received approval for this type of closed loop stimulation in Europe.
Congratulations.
Well, it's exciting. It's going to really help Parkinson's patients. That's the goal. And, we're working here in the United States to obtain approval on it as well. And we're hopeful that, we'll do that soon. But these are the types of things that are significant impact to patients. We've already have it approved in spinal cord stimulation in the United States, where 50 to 60 times a second, we're interrogating the spinal cord and understanding what's happening and then changing the stimulation based on that. It's really important for a couple of reasons. One, makes the patients feel better, we believe. And the other thing that it does is a lot of patients will adjust their therapy. Sometimes they get something called a zinger, which is if they move, the leads move, they move quickly. And if it's right at the moment when the stimulation occurs, it's close to their spinal cord and it's painful.
Yeah.
And so what happens is patients end up turning down or adjusting the therapy, and then it becomes subtherapeutic. And then patients want it to be explanted. What we've done by doing the closed loop is patients don't really touch it much anymore. They just kind of leave the therapy and let it work. And what this does, to give you an idea in layman's terms of what happens, let's say you're driving 60 miles an hour down the road and you hit a pothole. It'll sense that, and it'll drop out the stimulation for a very brief time period, allow you to go through that process, and then ramp up the stimulation right after that. So even if the leads move, you don't get a painful or an uncomfortable stimulation session. Keeps patients happier, keeps them more involved. By the same token, if the stimulation's not doing enough, it'll sense that and adjust the stimulation to do more. So it's this really cool ecosystem that is happening in pain and in Parkinson's patients. And what I'm excited about is where we can apply this technology, across other types of diseases, disorders, and conditions. So I could talk about a lot more, but those two things are super interesting right now.
Yeah, to me, as I age, unfortunately, and my parents are in their 80s, the concept of neurodegenerative indications scares the you know what out of me. It just
Yes,
does, because you feel like you're a prisoner in your own body,
yes,
and it's a physical injury or limitation. That's one thing, but when you know what's happening, but you can't articulate it, or you can't stop whatever it is, whether it's shaking or whatever it is that you're going through there, to be able to give those folks some relief is just astounding. I mean, people are living longer and they want to live better. They don't want to live in their 70s and 80s and struggle. That's not what they signed up for.
no, and none of us want to do that. You want to have a great quality of life for as long as you can have it. And I heard a toast once. You talked about wine at a wine event where somebody said, to a long and healthy life and a sudden death. And it took me a second to think about that, because I wasn't sure I liked it, but I understood the sentiment was, live very long and be very healthy, and not have these issues. And most of us don't remember, don't consider how good it feels to be, like you and I are right now, having this interaction, where, cognition is great, where we don't have any, issues happening, everything's working very well. And then when something is taken away from you, like you can't hold a cup of coffee without spilling it because of dyskinesias, with Parkinson's and those types of things, huge quality of life barrier. The first thing most of these patients do when they have an implant and they have Parkinson's is they go out to a meal with their family.
Ah, I love it. Yeah, the
So,
dignity part of this is so much more impactful than you realize until you or a family member goes through it.
yeah,
My dad had to recently start using a walker. My dad is a great athlete and
yes,
played tennis and golf and other sports his whole life. And this last few months, he's had to stop. And just the dignity of having to be helped to the car and get the walker out of the trunk for him. Like, that seems so minor to most people. To him, it's absolute hell. And
it
we're
is.
we're working through it for his spine. His spine's a mess. And so it's I didn't
Well,
know until I
yeah,
watched it. And now that I've seen it, I only want to participate in whatever it is that we can do. That's why I'm so glad to talk to you, because I want to scream this from the mountaintops about what's being done and how much progress has been made. Because if you looked at this 25, 30 years ago, there's nowhere near what we're talking about here.
yeah, the technology's really jumped in. And just going back to your father, and I know you know this and you have tremendous connections in the field, but if there's anything we can do to help, please
Well,
let us know. Be
no.
delighted to provide any referrals or anything that you have
Well,
there.
it's
Because
funny is you have in a way. Number one, I don't know if you know Dr. Hyde down in Miami,
yeah,
but
yeah,
he
yeah.
did my mom's
No,
he
sure.
did my mom's kyphoplasty,
All right.
and he's the guy helping my dad.
Okay,
And it's
great.
just funny. He knows the space really well, and we talked about all the guys in Kaufman back in the day because I worked with them
Yeah.
years ago, and we just started laughing about it, and it's just amazing. So indirectly, Medtronic has been helpful to my family on two fronts, and I'm grateful for it. So we'll see how that all plays out. He's a scrappy customer. He'll be all right.
Yeah, I hope so. My father's in his 80s and just
Yeah.
had major foot and ankle surgery, so he's going through the same thing, and almost same situation. A terrific athlete. He was a much better athlete than I ever was. Let's put it that
Tell me
way.
about it.
So he's getting back into the swing of things, but it's been a challenge.
Yeah, so I'd love to explore some more of the tech that's coming. And one of the areas, and I don't know if you're aware of this, you probably are because we talk about it so much, is robotics and
Sure.
how we are elbows deep in it. So I know that there was an attempt with Corindus, and it didn't get off the ground as much as everyone would like. And there's another company down here in Miami that's been working through it called Navigantis, and they're attempting to come at stroke from a robotics way. I'm curious what your thoughts are from a neurovascular standpoint, if robotics is in the offing for patients, or are we still a while away from that?
I think so. I think these things, don't kind of always become true until they're true.
Yeah.
And I think we've seen that in general surgery. right? Where, things really changed there dramatically over the last 20, 25 years. And as you know, we're working to compete in that space as well, with our Hugo robotic
Hmm.
system over on the med surge side. And there's a lot of benefit for that. When I look at neurovascular, I think there is opportunity and benefit to be able to do that. I think there's probably a few conditions. I think the system has to be, maybe simple to use, maybe simpler to use than what's been there before. You have to think about all the people around you that have to put it together. So intuitive, no pun intended, but being
Yeah.
something that you can use in a way that it's easy to understand is important. I think the other thing that probably isn't discussed very much is the benefits that you have when having robotic surgery that may allow physicians not to wear lead. I don't think we think about that enough. I don't know anyone that's been in neurovascular for a career that, doesn't, probably see a spine surgeon or someone after they're
Yeah.
done, their career because of, being bent over a table with, kind of lead on, bent over, placing catheters and doing those types of things. I think that's something that I probably should say like kind of hunched over and being able to go do that. That's hard on you over time. And maybe removing that, maybe having greater accuracy, maybe having other types of assistance during those procedures could be very beneficial.
Well,
One of the things, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say you had mentioned beneficial, and the triggered in my mind was speed.
Yes,
Every minute is brain, every second is brain, and
yes,
so from a robotic standpoint, if it could increase the throughput, how fast they can, whether it's diagnose it
sure.
or find the stroke or identify it. There's all these technologies that are out there now. Viz.ai, AI Doc, Rapid AI. There's a company I work with called Stroke DX that's doing great work on
Yes.
identifying this. I'm curious your thoughts there as it relates to AI and determining stroke to save seconds and hopefully save lives.
All of that is absolutely a wonderfully fantastic use case, for AI. Because if you think about it, if you can train the AI, and they're getting so good because they see so many of these head and neck images now that they can train for all of this. And one of the things that's absolutely true is through no fault of their own, because humans are humans. We get tired. We have all sorts of other issues. We miss things. And so when you have technology that can help you, number one, not miss things. Number two, provide decision assistance. That's really, really key. Decision assistance. I think that makes everyone a better physician. We have a business in GI. We have a product called GI Genius, and it's pretty amazing. What it does is it's just sits on the tech stack with the scope, and as they're doing the colonoscopy, it highlights polyps that the physician may not see for a variety of reasons. They're hard to see. There's light refraction. There's all these different areas, and we're finding that 40 to 50% of polyps are missed.
Wow. Are the
So
docs receptive to use this, or is it like
very,
referees
very,
who don't want the
very,
review?
very receptive because it's really assistance.
Yeah.
So imagine something sitting on your shoulder that says, "Just take a second look at that."
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very threatening way of providing data and information to make you better. And I think we could see the same thing, when we look at neurovascular, spine, robotics, all the other things that we're trying to do is using the data and the technology that is collectible in those situations to train the AI models to make them better and better and better. And we've all seen this. I remember years ago when I was in cardiology and in peripheral vascular, I had a very artful sales rep that I was with, and we were doing a leg scan of this particular patient, and there was a very large lesion that the physician missed. And it took the rep, who was extremely skilled, to say, "Excuse me, doctor, that tibial lesion, what were you planning on doing with that?" And the physician
Smooth.
stopped the scan. That was very smooth. Not everyone's that good. It stopped the scan and moved back to the lower leg and imaged it, and then of course, recovered very nicely and said, "Well, I was thinking we should balloon that," or he completely failed to see it.
Yeah.
And this, I will tell you who it was. This was somebody who's very skilled. Yeah,
Yeah.
So this is somebody I would send my family to and everyone else. But humans are humans, and we miss things. So when you can incorporate technology, like we're doing in spine, like the GI example I gave, like we're doing in other areas across surgery, because we have technology there that can help. I think when it's put into a decision assistance process, I think that really makes a huge, huge difference. And I think the physician still has this tremendous amount of knowledge and skill and feel for what's happening that's very hard to replicate. And I think those things are really important and should be emphasized and celebrated. And where we can augment and help, if you just go to, you know, Viz AI or Cure AI, the company in India, these other different companies that are doing this. I think everyone can understand that people miss things,
Yeah.
and you can highlight it for them. I just think it leads to better care and probably leads to all in better outcomes at the end of the day, because these patients get seen, they get treated, they get the therapy they need and deserve.
Now, you had mentioned early on in the conversation about Singapore. I'm curious from an international standpoint, how is the neuroscience world seen overseas? It's not a competition with the US, but I'm curious in comparison, are they more receptive? Are they less receptive? Are the patients more receptive or less receptive? Like what's the difference between US and OUS?
Well, I think it's probably hard to make that straight uh, analysis, because it's different by region, country.
Yeah.
It's very different in many places. I think what we've seen is, in places like China, there's been a rapid acceleration. Now, there's challenges in China too. There's volume-based procurement, where prices have gone down very dramatically, and you have to decide if you want to compete there or not. Some people are deciding they don't want to compete. Others, we've kind of made the decision that we're going to stay there because it's going to be the world's largest healthcare market at some point. So we want to be positioned there. But I've seen a tremendous acceleration there, where both scientifically and just clinically, they're seeing more patients getting much more experience, and at the same time, publishing in the New England Journal of Medicine and other areas there. So I think we're seeing good uptake there. I think the same is in Europe. Europe has always been kind of a forebearer for us, because so much of the technology was created there. If you think about modern neurointervention, really came out of Nancy, in France, with Luc Picard, and those individuals. And when you look at what they were able to do, and how they were able to grow that, it was tremendous benefit. And for a long time, I think they were much more penetrated and leading the way. And then ultimately, what happened in the United States, we had neurointerventionalists and we had neurologists who were interventionalists. And I think also what really helped is we had a large neurosurgery community that decided, they should be trained and they should learn this. And, Nick Hopkins at Buffalo really created that model. And neurosurgery then, in the private practices and everywhere else, really drove neurointervention as well. So I think in the early days on neurovascular, it probably was Europe really driving things, and I think they still do to some extent. But the U.S. has just really exploded, over the last, during my career, the last 25 years, and part of that I think was where it was going. Across the board on the rest of neuroscience, I think it really depends by market. One of the challenges we have is some therapies we have to make more accessible to others, because there's markets where price is a barrier, or access to the technology is a barrier. And we're working on that to determine are there ways we can provide access where, there's lower, lower cost of acquisition of the technology, or different technologies that we can employ in those particular areas. So it's quite diverse. It's very different. At the same time, the whole world is really checking into the fact that these diseases and disorders of the brain are a really big problem that actually manifest in their economies. And so they're looking for solutions in companies like ours and others to come in and help.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that. I'm not one of those who thinks America's the best at everything kind of person. I think we lead in a lot of areas, but I love hearing that other countries are pushing forward. I mean, in the last few years, the way the robotics space in Paris has grown
Yeah.
instrumentally is
Yeah.
amazing, and there's so much innovation going on around the world, and it's great to see. And I love seeing that it's trickling down to patients and making sure that they get what they need, that they're not having access issues. Because I think that some of the countries that you're talking about, especially the larger ones, there's a lot of rural type of
Yeah.
areas of the country where they just don't have access to any of this.
Very
And
hard to get somewhere and get
yeah,
access.
yeah.
It's not simple.
No,
It's
it's
not.
not. One of the things I noticed about Medtronic that I was curious about, and this is a soft spot for me, but I'm curious if it's as good as I had read, which is pediatrics within the neurospace. And
Mhm.
and I know that you all have a suite of products there, and I wanted to give you some credit for that because when I first got into this business, I was shocked that they would not Medtronic, but companies in general were using adult devices and making them work for kids. And I'm like, how could that be? And then you learn, hey, look, it's not a huge business. It's hard to resource something like that when there's not much ROI. But I'm curious about Medtronic's pediatric side of neurospace, if you could touch on that.
Sure. I mean, if you look at that area, a big part of it is the shunts business and being able to, moderate or at least manage CSF fluid in a lot of these patients. And, some of these children have
Yeah.
hydrocephalus and it's a life-threatening situation, and they need a shunt. And they need, programmable shunts that will drain the appropriate amount of fluid. And they also need shunts that are safe for MRI, ones that they can have implanted that the children can go through an MRI scanner and they can be okay, that you can actually do that. So we've produced a number of these technologies for that particular space. And it's a very powerful thing. And it's one of the challenges right now is many times trying to meet the worldwide demand, for these
Yeah.
is because they're kind of hard to build. And we have to constantly add resources to, be able to get our production levels up. And this is a very serious thing. If you don't know about it or haven't had it or don't know anybody who has it, uh, literally mothers have tracked me down. They've gotten my name somehow, and they've tracked me down because they're moving from one city to another city, and they're desperate to understand who is the exact physician they need to take their child to when they get to this new city. And they want a recommendation, or at least knowledge from us on who they should go see. So it's a very fraught thing, if you have a child in this area. And we talk about it a lot. I mean, when we talk to our operations teams and our manufacturing teams, we remind them that there's a child at the end of this technology, and that many times it is a life-threatening condition. And that's why, we're expanding. That's why we need their help. That's why we have to, continue to build it up. And it's a humbling business
Yeah, it
because
sure is.
actually, you see what the technology can do, and you can see what happens if the technology isn't there. And it's something, we work on all the time. And you have to when you feel it from somebody that is just looking for help for their child, that's when it really drives home, what you get to do.
Yeah, I mean, there are there are very few relationships that are as powerful as when a mom's helping another mom, and they because they get it, they've been
Yeah,
there, and we've
yeah,
all whoever has children, you know that somewhere I think there, and I always have this in my head that there's this big wheel that somebody spins, and your kid gets this, whatever it is.
yeah,
Sometimes it's as simple as freckles, and sometimes
yeah.
it's cerebral palsy, and it's amazing how like every kid has something. And when you find your people who have been through what you're about to go through, it's just so incredibly validating, number one. And most of the time, they want to help. Like, I've been there. I know exactly what you're feeling. Here's who you call. Here's what you do. It's your name must be on a wall somewhere that
Well,
somebody is saws your number there that they're calling you because they look out for each other.
well, there's times you can help, and then sometimes you can't help, and those are the
Yeah.
tough ones.
Well, of course.
When there maybe isn't a next thing. We did have at one point we had a child who had been treated with one of our technologies, and this child was born with a very challenging malformation called a vein of Galen, and basically these children die of heart failure because they have this massive shunting malformation in their brain that takes so much blood. The heart is working overtime to try to pump that much blood. And what happens is basically they die of heart failure,
Yeah.
the child. And it's a thing I think everyone looks for. Your child's born, okay, 10 fingers, 10 toes, all the things that people look for. Looks like a healthy child, and then a few days into this child's life, they became very unhealthy. And this child was born in a rural hospital, and they handed the parents some information, and basically it said, prepare for your child to die, was basically the message. And the two sisters, one sister of the husband, one sister of the wife, got together, and they just couldn't accept this. And so what they did is they Google, they did research, they did all these different things. They found a physician at UCLA who they called, and his first comment was, well, send me the films, I might be able to help you. And they received the films, and they looked at it, and they scheduled this young boy, infant, and they treated him with our technology, and they were able to stop the flow into that area and that malformation. And we brought this child and the family to Medtronic, and it makes me almost emotional still thinking about it, was really powerful, is they told the whole story, and then they brought the child out, and he looked like any typical toddler. He was playing on the ground with trucks and things that children do. And not only that, is we were able to introduce the family to the person on the line who had built the product.
Holy smokes.
Yeah,
Love it.
it was very cool, very emotional, but really drove home the work that you do. There is someone at the end of that, and if you do your job, you do it well, you get those days where that child's going to have a normal life. They're going to go to high school, they're going to go to college if they want, or take up a trade, or get married, have kids, do the whole thing. They're going to have a normal life, because of that. Whereas a few decades ago, or maybe a decade, whatever it was, you weren't going to have a normal, you were going to die. And so it's a super powerful reminder, because we get lost in the numbers and the fights for market share, and all the other things that every other business gets involved in. But a lot of businesses don't get the opportunity to see that you had that kind of impact on another human, and that's the part that thrills me, terrifies me a little bit, because of the need that's out there, and at the same time is so gratifying because you get to do it.
Listen, there's a reason why folks like us don't leave the space. We're in it until they tell us I can't be anymore, and that's the deal. Yeah, I'd love to explore a bit about you, because I don't think folks have an idea how three-dimensional you are. So for those of you that might be interested, I mentioned wine earlier. Brett has his own label, Open Claim. And so I'd love if you take a minute and just give me an idea of how things are going with his vintage, and how things are coming along with your winery.
Well, it's something I don't get to do very much. My wife Marnie really runs it, and because she kind of left her career to spend time doing this. It's a work of passion. It's something I'm really interested in, because there's science and technology, and Mother Nature's involved, and all these things, and the goal is you try to make the best wine you can every year. And the challenges, like an old winemaker told me. He said, most people, if they do this for a living, and I didn't start it as my career.
Yeah.
Most people, if they're lucky, get to do it 60 times, because you do it once a year.
Yep.
That's all you get to do. You have to figure out, the things that are good and bad, and the things to start doing and stop doing, and change happens slowly there. But at the end of the day, yeah, you create something that, I think is kind of exciting, and it's a joyful thing because it brings people together. And we've always looked at wine as kind of part of a meal, and so when you bring people together around the table, it's despite maybe some of the Surgeon General's warnings and some of the other things that have just been shared with us all. I think there's a benefit there that's probably hard to quantify. It's the benefit of community. It's the benefit of friendship. It's the benefit of conviviality, with different people. And at the same time, you get the opportunity to do some cool things. We made a Pinot Noir in the 21 vintage, and it's called Flora's Veil, and we make one called Fauna's Wood. But Flora's Veil is the more floral components of the vineyard. And that's a very special wine for me because my mother's name was Flora.
Oh, wow.
And my mom was in healthcare, and she retired 4 days before her 80th birthday. She was a chief radiology technician in our community hospital where I grew up. And she passed away last summer. And she was really instrumental in my life, and someone that I learned a great deal about resilience and grit and strength of character, and just, and then being optimistic when things were challenging or tough or hard, looking to what it could be. And I've told everyone that all the things that are good about me came from my mother. Everything else I learned on my own.
Does that include your singing?
Oh wow, you're really digging deep now.
Hey, listen, man, this is what we do.
On this. Not really. That kind of just happened. I played at that. I did it in university level, and was part of like more choral or chamber music during that particular time in my life. My nephew, on the other hand, was really good at it. He was a scholarship opera singer.
Wow.
And was really good at that. So he was the real deal on it. I would put it this way: I was a participant in that. Is what I would say.
Yeah. Did your mom pass before you were able to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange?
Yeah. It was probably 3 or 4 months before.
I mean, what was that like? I've talked to some people who've done it, and they said surreal is the word that everybody uses.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it's really interesting because for me, I grew up in a small farming community in Nebraska, and things like that in New York were far away, and kind of not not touchable, because it was something that happened over here. What was really interesting about it was being able to go there and tell our story, about what Medtronic does. Why it was important. And they got to tell their story about how they, worked to convince Earl Bakken to list the company. They showed us letters that they had sent to Earl Bakken to list Medtronic. I think it was back in the 70s or something, was when it probably first got listed. And but the attempts, to convince him that they should be listed. What was really interesting was kind of being on the floor. How the floor is set up today, it's very different than maybe what we all think of in the movies, with a bunch of traders, because so much of it's electronic now. You meet the market makers, you meet the individuals that, make the market for your stock, and, match the buyers and sellers, and bring them all together. And on the day we were there, they put all on the ticker tape. They had all of Minnesota companies that were public. So all the Minnesota companies were up there. Showing, Hormel was up there, Target, different Minnesota companies, showing their ticker. And the good news is we we got to do that, and our stock went up that day. So that
Wow.
even it makes you feel better. You know what I mean? Like,
I get it. I hadn't
stock went
thought
the
of it
right
that
direction.
way. That's funny.
Yeah, yeah. It
Awesome.
was a really um, fascinating and interesting place. I've been to the floor before, and I've been to the stock exchange before. That's the first time, we actually got to go up there and ring the bell at the, up on the mezzanine there to go do that. And it's a lot smaller than you think it is. It
Yeah.
looks like a certain size because you get a lot of people in there, but it's a lot smaller than you actually think it is. And then what's cool is when you're all done, you go out the back and then behind the mezzanine, and then there's a big wall, and you sign the wall.
Wow.
Everyone signed the wall that rang the bell. So that was exciting and fun to do.
Yeah, well, this has been every bit as informative as I thought it would be because I always knew that you were an onion and just I wanted to share it with the world. Well, listen, thanks so much for being on. Everybody, this is Brett Wall, and he is somebody that you want to know. Thanks so much
Thank
for participating.
thank you. It was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it.
And this has been the Family Business, a specialized version just for Brett. And I look forward to catching up with you soon. Let's be in touch this year.
All right. Sounds good. Take care.
All right, sir.